Well, I think I just kind of evolved into this work. I've always been active on some level around some issues since I was a teenager. I went to my first demonstration when I was 14 years old. I became politicized when I went away to college in 1968. And then I ended up working in public health after college. And public health, as you know, is rooted in a set of principles that very much align with social justice and social action work. And that is, people have a right to things like clean water, people have a right to decent and sanitary housing. Children have a right to immunization and uh, um, uh, primary care, all things that we take for granted now, with the exception of water, which it feels like we're going backwards in terms of that kind of community commitment. But a lot of those policies and practices grew out of public health and grew out of a movement to improve the quality of life, particularly in low-income communities and in rural communities. The main projects that we're focused on here at Detroit People's Platform include our work on affordable housing. We staff the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the trust fund is a housing opportunity embedded in the inclusionary housing zone that was established back in 2017, and it grew out of organizing work with Detroit People's Platform and other housing justice advocates and social service providers to establish a fund that 70% of that money in the fund goes to create housing opportunities for families and households who make $35,000 or less here in the city of Detroit. And as you know, those are the folks that are most vulnerable to eviction and displacement. National policy work around increasing the opportunities for affordable housing for low-income families. And so we're in a couple of work groups with the Housing and Urban Development HUD, and we've done some advocacy and policy work in collaboration with MISHDA here at the state government. The next piece that we're working on is transit justice. We focus on transit, public transit, because 87% of the ridership are African Americans, and they are folks here in the city of Detroit who depend on public transit as their primary means of transportation. And so we believe public transit should be accessible, affordable, and to all folks who depend on it as a primary means of transportation. We also believe that there's a justice aspect to it, given the history that public transportation especially, has played in the lives of African Americans. Just thinking about Black History Month, we celebrate the birthday of Mother Rosa Parks, who, as we know, was the symbol of the civil rights movement, but she was also a symbol for transit justice as well. If you recall her pushback about disparate treatment in riding the public buses down in Birmingham, Alabama. We fight for better bus service. We fight to make sure that service is maintained in the local neighborhoods and not just those corridors that are serving suburbanites coming in and out of the city, or the gentrifying areas in the city. So we fight for widespread public transit that serve neighborhoods across the city of Detroit. We're in the DDOT space, the Detroit Department of Transportation, holding them accountable to the mandates included in our city charter, which says Detroiters have a right to expect from its city government accessible, affordable public transit. So the next area of focus is the equitable development. and that's our community benefit agreement work. As you know, we were part of the original coalition and campaign back in 2016 that fought to get a strong community benefit agreement on the books, passed as an ordinance, which would hold private developers accountable when they come into the city and extract public tax dollars and subsidies to build private economic projects that generate profit for them. We're the first city in the country to get a CBA ordinance, and what that ordinance requires is that any economic development project here in the city of Detroit that's $75 million or greater receives $1 million in public tax subsidies and or land from the city below market rate, has to meet with the impacted residents in the nearby neighborhood where the development is happening, and negotiate a community benefit agreement. Water affordability sort of is, again, one of those sort of basic rights that I think all folks have should have access to and opportunity for. The notion of safe, affordable water for communities is a primary tenet of public health. It's also a primary tenet of what assets and services should be available in communities, regardless of income. And so when we're organizing around affordable housing, we want not only affordable housing, but we want affordable housing that is quality housing and that's accessible housing. Quality housing means that families and individuals need to have access to water in their homes, and you know, that means that there's plumbing, quality plumbing, and families are able to access water at rates that they can afford. So for us, affordable housing includes healthy housing, and healthy homes. Healthy housing includes access to fresh, affordable, potable water. In terms of development, our equitable development and CBA work, we know that historically, here in the city of Detroit, corporations have not paid their fair share. Not only have they not paid their fair share of taxes on some of these development projects, but in some of the day-to-day expenses that we regular Detroiters have to shoulder. And that means I can think of no other place where it's so apparent than in their water usage or overusage, and yet not being subjected to the same kind of draconian rules and subjected to cut off like households, everyday households here. When we think about equitable development and what that looks like, it means that these large corporate developers pay their fair share, that they honor the usage and value water as a precious resource. You don't look up and see water just running down the street. Being and them being given a pass when we're noticing widespread shutoffs. So it's holding these developers accountable around how they use water and how they're charged and paid for waters. There are just so many examples of how Detroiters are being marginalized, not so much through any fault of their own, but in the way government is not showing up for them and responding to these really important and critical issues. And in some ways, government's undermining and getting in the way of the really good, progressive, Black-centered, life-affirming work that Detroiters have been doing for years. So I would just caution Detroiters to become more aware of that, and to be conscious about it in their community work, in their organizing work, and in holding elected officials accountable to what they owe us as public servants. We welcome Detroiters to join our campaigns. We encourage Detroiters to follow our newsletter, which is where we push out a lot of information and updates not only around our campaigns, particular campaigns we're working on, but just sort of keeping Detroiters up to date on what's happening that impacts majority Black Detroit in terms of fighting for a just and equitable community. And we organize underground. So if someone wants to invite us into their community to help organize around their issues with Black club members, neighborhood associations, faith groups, it's just a matter of reaching out to us. So we make ourselves available. Whatever resources we have that we think will benefit community, we're happy to share those. Build power, and use that power, will that power towards the good, toward the collective good.